Well, hello again, everybody. Thank you very much indeed for coming back for the sixth event today. Is it the sixth? Yeah, that's right, the sixth event today, which is Open Forum. As I've already said, my plan here is not to say very much, but just to facilitate conversations, to hear other people's views, because I'm sure that you're not just sitting there just trying to absorb everything that's being said, but you've actually got something to say. It's a huge subject, this, quite honestly, which is really about bringing life skills into the world of children, into the world of teens. What age can you start? What age should you start? Who should be involved in helping our children with their positive mental health to overcome the problems that a lot of them are facing, to prepare them so they don't even have to get involved in those sort of problems. The bottom line to all of this is that they are the next set of adults. And we are adults. Some of us have been there a little longer than others, but we are all adults and we have had to learn a lot from experience. But how much would we have been better prepared if we'd actually been taught and given the opportunity to experience the life skills that we talk about today? And I'm not just saying, so join the Scouts and go camping and things like that. I'm more interested in how we can help the youngsters communicate what you see are the problems that youngsters are having these days, how we can develop that awareness that they can work with each other rather than going straight off the deep end and falling out almost before they've read the text. So, with that in mind, who's going to be brave enough to start? I'd love to hear some more views apart from my own. Shilma. So Shima.
All right. Well, thank you for this opportunity. What I see being involved with young people is, besides what were discussed here, one is definitely the social media being online, which also exposes them to false information, how to separate correct information from false information. In terms of the mental health crisis, it also contributes because there's a lot of information there that are posted by unqualified people, young people, whoever, on depression, on OCD, on autism, self-harm, whatever you name it. And young people listen to other young people who are posting their tried and whatever solutions, which might, and I think there is research that shows it, is that they do take it by face value, and they do engage in different issues. Even though in the beginning, I think one of you mentioned that self-harm decreased. I don't know where this research is from, so I don't know if it's a global trend, but from what I do see is it's on the increase, but maybe I don't know. Another thing is exposure to pornography, which also affects the mental health, and it is the online sexual exploitation. It's a big issue. And I think the climate change, there's a lot of fear, anxiety around climate change and the ongoing wars. So sorry, I already told a lot, but I see these as really the main issues affecting the mental health of young people.
Sheila, thank you very much indeed for that. Yes, you make some very, very pertinent points there.
Аз имам само за тебе такава храна. За нея нямам банички такива работи.
Just muting you, Milena.
Да, виж, аз си донесох това, защото тя не е яла.
Right. As, can anybody add to a lot of that? Particularly, I want to, perhaps on the first part of what you said was that ability, that opportunity, that perhaps inability to separate out false information and particularly unqualified information. Vanessa?
You're asking my opinion there?
Well, it's just that you're unmuted, so I thought you wanted to.
No, I'm being quiet in the background, but
Okay.
let me think about. I mean, obviously, I have an example of a child who's moved from one country to another, from Switzerland to the UK, and I find that maybe it's the age, but he was 13. He's now just turned 15. He lost a lot of weight while being in the UK. He needed to lose some weight, but wow. And I guess that's through just being in an environment where body image has been kind of exemplified as you've got to have a certain shape and being. But maybe that was his age. Maybe that would have happened anywhere, whether that be Switzerland or here. Anyway, he needed to lose some weight, but I kind of, wow, it was done very, very fast. And I guess it was motivated through social media. And he's a boy. Yeah, and in the school, it's very obvious to him that it's a school that's governed by certain students, and then the rest of them. So there's that to navigate. He tells me he spends 60-70% of his time understanding the social that's going on, because that's really important for him and his well-being, and maybe 30-40% of studies. So overall, maybe those children can be, yeah, I'm not inside the school to actually understand much, but I did say to the head when I saw them at parent evening this week, and he said, how's Daniel fitting in? I said, listen, not too badly. I mean, average in terms of the transition. There's some things going on in the social strata of the school, which is quite, I told him about this 60% learning how to manage that and 40% on studies. And the reply from the school was, well, we can only really control what's going on in the classroom. We can't really control what's going on otherwise. So yeah, it's work in progress as to how children today are navigating social in, he's in a state school, so non-fee paying. So not a private sector. I grew up in the private sector here. It's very different. I'm glad to see that he can handle all the social stuff going on. And yeah, it's quite an eye-opener for me. I've been involved in this adolescent foundation coaching with Noble Manhattan. I haven't yet taken it into the schools, but I do see that there's I'm wondering how it's operating, and that's why it's really important to be inside the schools to see and feel what's going on, and to keep lines of communication with the young students open. We talk about flexible working now for adults, whether flexible schooling at a certain age is important for teenagers, because after the pandemic, they saw that they could have flexible schooling. They went to, into a different kind of mode. And I don't know if it's been that easy for them to return to a more disciplined, 100% unflexible go to school. I think that should be addressed a bit, certainly for some different types of students, neurodivergent students. So yeah, it's a whole bag of new stuff. And as older generation, where we've gone through a system which has been more disciplined, no social media, a lot of rigor, because that was what we learned about, how to be resilient. And I certainly spent a lot of time on the mountains, and yeah, it's a different world, and I'm very open to be part of this new world. And I think it starts with a lot of communication as well, non-directive communication, in order to hear, because we have to learn from the kids, and learning from the kids is with brains that are not quite mature enough to teach us. That's the hard part. So that's just my comments of what strategy we need to go forward. It's to get inside the schools and to observe and to really be able to apply some decent studies and research to how we can help them going forward.
Great. Well, thanks very much indeed for that. It's very pertinent to hear the sort of the view from the sharp end, as it were. You know, I have a couple of teenagers who try and tell me what it's like for them at school, and I have to agree with you. It's hugely difficult. Perhaps COVID has brought into our awareness the need of that the social aspect of schooling brings. I don't know. You know, lots of kids are actually now sort of out of school. I heard one group of schools was talking about 25% of their school population was significantly away from school. And I think by significantly away, they meant to 10%, which is frightening to me. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but if that's the sort of attitude of children, you know, we don't want to be at school. Something somewhere is going wrong. Perhaps we need to sort of get the sort of the skills training in at an early stage. I don't know. What are people's views about when it should start? Is this something that we teach the teenagers about? Is this something that we encourage the youngsters to, sort of the young children to deal with? What are your views on that?
Can I just share a kind of different
Ellen?
perspective? And
Yeah, please do.
so we're a home ed family.
Okay.
We've been home educated now. This will be coming up to our 5th year. My first child was in mainstream here in the UK, and then we switched to independent schools, which is where my twins also were there for 2 years. And then we decided to travel Europe for a year. And now we homeschool. So we've got a different kind of perspective, I suppose. And I find it very interesting listening to parents talking about schools and social media and responsibility. So in terms of social media, I do think there's a lot more we could be doing as parents to help our children and support them, because at certain ages, we know that they're not emotionally able and mentally able to cope with the world that they're exposed to from a very young age. And I think as parents, we could be putting boundaries in place whereby, you know, it's either restricting access to social media. You know, that's, I think, quite easy. All my children, they can't see certain content, which I hear like from their friends. They're viewing things at sleepovers and at school that they shouldn't really be looking at certain ages. So I feel like it's a parental responsibility to make sure we're monitoring what they're watching and what they're listening to. I do see the implications of it when they're at school. You know, we can't really control everything, but I do think there's more that we can be doing at home as parents. And in terms of, I'm losing my train of thought now, in terms of education and responsibility with like their life skills and things, I think that schools are obviously, they've got so much to do already. At what age we kind of teach children some of these life skills like resilience and communication skills. It is so difficult because a lot of the parents themselves don't have these skills. So whose responsibility is it to teach them? I do think it's the parental responsibility to teach them these skills, because school has education as its priority. However, there are lots of families where the parents, for whatever reason, aren't in a position to teach their own children these skills. So that's where I do think it's important that we bring it into an education system so we can offer it for children. Maybe not even education settings, maybe, things like counseling, coaching. Obviously, we're all here today together because we probably all agree how beneficial it is. And if we can open up more of these services to people alongside education, not necessarily in the education setting itself. So just a couple of thoughts and ramming out.
No, lovely to hear. Thank you, Alan. That's very, very interesting. I mean, you're coming from it from a different angle, from the homeschooling side of things, which we've got a couple of kids up the road who've been homeschooled, and it's absolutely delightful. Unfortunately, I hear of instances where children are being quote homeschooled, where they have not actually got the parental guidance that you are obviously giving to yours, which I find difficult. It's always the same. You get the good side of it, but there is this sort of this grey side of kids just skipping off school, and the parents actually allowing them to skip off school by claiming that they're being homeschooled, and that is worrying. That is truly worrying. You brought out a very good point. Whose responsibility is it? Should we actually be teaching the parents? Are the parents ready to listen?
Yeah,
I've got to ask that question.
I've got one of my close friends is actually an attendance officer at a local secondary school here. Well, it's a large school, and they have so many challenges, and it's heartbreaking to hear that when they approach the families about their children's attendance, some of them literally attend school twice a year because of anxiety or depression. They can't get the children into the school environment, and the school really want to help, and they're doing everything that they can and trying to have that open communication. But you've got parents that cannot cope with their own mental health. They're in no state to help their own children. And the children, some of them are really clever and they know what to say so that they don't need to go to school. It's just so challenging.
It is. Vicky's just got saying that she fully agrees with you. Gita. Gita. Sorry, Gita.
That's okay. Yeah, thank you. And today has been an interesting day. Maybe I just need to say who I am and where I'm coming from. So I'm an educational psychologist of over 30 years. Before that, I was a teacher. So I just want to echo some of the sentiments and thoughts that have been actually just voiced. We are seeing, an increase in the number of children who appear to be experiencing something known as EBSA. So that's emotionally based school avoidance. And yes, unfortunately, there are a group of pupils, and within that, there will be the pupils who would be seen as falling into the EBSA category, who are just not attending school. So it's not always about not wanting to. There really are sort of real emotional needs there. In terms of Ian, your very first sort of really large and important question, do we need to be teaching life skills? Yes. And I mean, that's just the simple answer, because we are seeing that there is a gap between the skills that the children are developing or haven't even yet developed, and what, for example, future employers are perhaps, expecting, and not just future employers, but future employment opportunities. So yeah, it is something, but where that sits, is it something that sits alongside school or within school? I mean, I think that's the topic that's going to be debated.
Gita, thanks very much indeed for that input. It's very, very valuable. Does anybody want to come back on that one? Milena.
Hi. First of all, thank you for the opportunity and for the whole day today. It was really interesting and very, how should I say, um, bringing the spirit up in connection with what we experience on a daily basis. I should also say where I come from. I come from Bulgaria. I'm actually a parent of 2 teenagers and 1 6-year-old. And I work as a financial, in the financial field, but I work in a nonprofit organization that deals with, um, so it is called actually Association Parents. It helps teachers to find a way to build communities so that parents and teachers can work together for the kids. Unfortunately, actually, one thing that I will take from this conference and I really like is the absolute belief in from everyone that we should teach our kids the skills and our experiences. Very many people now have the opinion that we don't know what the future opportunities for our kids will be. We don't know what would be the requirements of the working place. We don't know what they will need to do in 10 years' time when they grow up. So how can we teach them? And I do see something very valid in this because yes, the world is changing really quickly. Unfortunately, what I see is also that the kids believe it. My teenagers do come to me and tell me you come from, and not only to me, but all the kids around me, they go to their parents and they say, you know, you are from the previous century. You grew up without the telephone, but not only in the sense, you know, not only trying to say you don't understand what you're experiencing, but also saying effectively, there is nothing that you can tell me that can actually help me deal with what I do. And this is why I was also posing this question previously, and I'm sorry that I didn't ask earlier from some of the speakers who have a lot of experience with this, with working with kids. It's very interesting. How do you actually show these kids that your experience, your skills are something that in some way will help them, probably not in exactly the way that you think would help them or that they imagine now, but they are helpful and they should learn from this. This is very valid also when it comes to academic studies. Most of the kids say uh, we don't care about school because there is nothing that they can teach us that we cannot find on the net. So I think that I think that my background, my experience now comes with children that are a bit younger. They're not already in the pre-university. Pre-university, I believe things change a little bit. They start to understand a little bit more what academics means and why do you need to learn all these things. But the whole essence for me and the whole everything that was discussed here would be, yes, parents are and older people, grown-up people, people with experience in relation to um, skills and to emotional intelligence are really important for kids. And no matter how much you're put down, you really should look for ways to reach them. And I'm really happy that I did find in some of the talks today very concrete and specific examples on how exactly to approach a topic and how exactly to reach a point where actually your conversation leads to something and has some impact on these young people. I
Well,
think
Milena,
I put like 20 questions on.
That's all right. Thank you very much indeed for that. It's you know, you raised some very valid points here as to exactly how to sort of communicate with the children and this aspect of what are they you know, what do they think they're learning at school, whereas, you know, while it could be about, I'm going to say mathematics again, but actually a lot of mathematics is teaching them how to solve problems. A lot of language is about communication, so perhaps there's more that they can learn sort of outside of the core subject. They, there's a lot of talk about, how useful learning a musical instrument is, not just for the music, but actually for the brain development. Is it Ivo?
Yeah, hi, it's Ivo. Thank you.
Ivo,
Um,
tourisms.
thank you. Just wanted to add to what Milena just said. How are we supposed to teach and prepare our kids for the future if we don't know how the future would look like? For example, my job didn't exist 10 years ago. And that's the reason why I very much like what Margaret Mead said a long time ago. Children must be taught how to think, not what to think. And if this is kind of implemented in the families, in the schools, and somehow working alongside that with the children, coaching them, mentoring them, teaching them how to think, then we might be on a good pathway there.
Ivo, thank you very much indeed. How to think, not what to think, I think is very, very valuable. I've been watching the chat, and there's some information, very interesting communication going on there. Can I just sort of throw into that? I wonder how many children see the adults not going back to work but working from home, and thinking that, well, if they're not going back to work, why should we go back to school? Is this part of it, do you think? Or is that just a sideline? Is that a rabbit hole? Perhaps it's the kids are genuinely having that difficulty of sort of re-engaging. And I think there are a huge number of children who are having that problem re-engaging. But how can we learn from that to ensure that, should children be in that position again, and after all, we've never locked down a country before like that, how can we make sure that the children are indeed prepared a bit better for things like that? And I think therefore it's got to start at a very early age, and perhaps the first years of school are very useful. It's always been brought out today that the sort of, if you like, the highest common factor, who can take charge of this? That parents, there are a lot of parents who are incredibly good with their children, and a lot of parents, as was said, for whatever reason, it's not a social divide, for whatever reason, are not in a place where they can cope or work with their children over this. Perhaps they don't understand, perhaps they haven't got the time, perhaps they're too busy trying to keep the family going, perhaps they're just sort of totally overstretched. It's all these factors. So where is the common denominator here? And realistically, to me, it is the education system. But is the education system prepared to take this forward? And I think the answer, to me, the answer is they've got to be prepared to take it forward, but they are not being directed so to do yet. I love that word yet. We use it in coaching quite a lot for various things, but I think it's important that we've got to keep that door open. We've got to keep pushing towards it. Free parenting courses. Yeah, what a good idea. How many parents, though, think they know it all? I'll put my hand up on that one. I became a parent. Was anybody going to teach me how to parent? No, I'm an adult. I know these things. Well, until such times as I found I didn't. But what about grandparents? How can we bring them into the mold? Have they got the time to quietly help us with our children? Come on, somebody come back to me on that one.
Can I go a step further, actually, Ian? And the point that Vanessa brought up, that lad was spending 50–60% of the time, I think it was, on his social at school. Now, we all assume that it's easy to assume, and the media perception is that they're watching, cat videos and TikTok dances and who knows what else. How much of that is positive influence that goes on in that social environment? And where are and who are the positive influences? Who's the antithesis of that awful tape man? There are good things out there, and there are things that the kids are latching on to. I'll give you a good example. In one of the Sydney suburbs where I used to live, there was a lad who was, this is pre-COVID, was unable to get to school for a particular injury or illness, I forget which, but he loved maths, and he had an inspirational maths teacher, a chap called Eddie Wu, and he said, he pleaded with him, said, look, can you set up some math lessons for me so I can do this from home because I can't get into school, and he did this, and the word got around, so there was influence, there was a spread. And his maths lesson online were engaging, they were interesting, they were relevant, they had a point to them, they were fun. And all of a sudden, this thing started to grow. And there is now an entity there called WooTube, where he reaches out across the entire nation and probably beyond. Incredibly successful. So that influence exists. That's one example that I know from my limited experience with young folk. How can we identify them, and then how can we harness them? And accept the fact that they'll still watch cat videos and podcasts, whatever. But can we get a bit of a balance? If that's actually the shape of their life, let's not try and fight it. Let's work with it. And where does that influence come from? And all of us, in our own way, exert influence. I use the word influencer. It makes me sound as though I'm trying to be a Kardashian, God forbid. But we have influence, and it all accumulates, and how can we do that? And so I just thought out who and where are those influences out there, for positive good.
That is a very good point, because who influences us? How can we persuade those who are incredibly good at influencing our children to actually put in that positive message that about the life skills? So rather than just mindfully watching how to play Minecraft or things like that, they're actually involved in doing that. Perhaps that you're absolutely right. There's a very good opportunity there. Perhaps it needs more coaches. And this is the wonderful thing about coaching, is that it being non-judgmental as it is, that you've got the opportunity of being involved with all people at all levels, and particularly coaches will work with their clients in their client's space, and so therefore it becomes much more. It encompasses far more people, the neurodivergent and things like that. Those who don't think the way that the education system wants them to think, or encourages them to think, or tells them to think. And that is perhaps part of the problem, that there are people out there who react in a totally different way. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. Each and every one of us is unique. And we all think uniquely, we all act uniquely, we all do uniquely. And so therefore we've got to just, be able to work out how to harness all of that. I'm of the opinion that we can train a lot of the parents through the children, but we can't necessarily train the parents for the children. So perhaps there's that generational aspect that we've actually got to put in some boundaries. We've got to say, hey guys, you've got to do this. You've got to do this life skills training. But we don't call it that, of course. We call it, some other form of education. And we try and make it as fun as possible. And we try and take the examination aspect out of it. Well, we don't so much try and take it out. We don't even put it in the first place. So it becomes a much more a greater opportunity for the kids to learn to discuss rather than to learn to listen. And that aspect of it is really what has been mentioned by several people today about the other subject, the subject that dare not speak its name, is that it is the basis of just that. It is age-appropriate basis of bringing in these life skills, either in classes, groups, or even one-to-one, to help individual children, individual teenagers to learn to develop and think through those problems. It's not just about intervening in a mental health problem. It's about preparing them so that they are avoiding those mental health problems. And that's really what it's about. It's been mentioned about the what is required by industry, what is required in the workplace. Geeta brought that out, I think, was the, I'm hearing this from various employers, is what we are receiving out of the education system isn't good enough. There's no resilience, there's poor communication, there's lack of awareness, and there's all of those sorts of things. And that is, it is worrying. That is why we're trying to evolve perhaps a formal life skills program such that in 5-10 years, the kids coming out at the far end are prepared for life in a much better way than perhaps they are at the moment. Yeah, sure, we've had some knocks, and one of the biggest ones is COVID. We've had some heavy knocks. In other countries, they've had some huge knocks. Let's take Ukraine and the war. Let's take what's happening in the Middle East. And it's happening in other places around the world as well. They're taking some huge knocks. But in a way, we've got to recover from that. We've got to go forward, and we've got to go forward in the best way possible. So anybody else going to come in with, wish me luck, my son wants to study criminology. And why not? It's a good it's a good thing to study, and there's plenty of it. Educational consultation service to generate critical and creative thinking in schools. Good. Has anybody, by any chance, has anybody got the ear of somebody in the Department for Education, a decision maker in the Department for Education in the United Kingdom? Because if they have, it's at that level we've almost got to go in, because the schools are not going to do anything until they're told to do it. A lot of them, because if authority's been taken away. Karine, did I see you raise your hand there? You're muted. You're muted.
Yes, I'm getting very animated now. I'm an ex-teacher. This is all starting to become very sort of close to my heart.
Well, I hope it's I hope it's in the right way. I'm trying to encourage debate, but I don't want to encourage negative debate.
No, absolutely in the right way. It's been my feeling over the past sort of 10 years or so. I gave up teaching 3 years ago. And I just saw the downward pressure of Ofsted on the curriculum, and how school became a place where we worked so hard on making it a joyous place, an inviting place, and where children would want to be, where they wanted to learn, where it was exciting. And I worked in a really tough school in a really tough area, and we got those children in and we got them excited and wanting to be there. And then I just saw this downward pressure on the curriculum, and how we were very much told how to spoon feed our children, the maths curriculum, the English curriculum, and it was very directed, and the creativity was lost, and the fun and the joy was lost. And so that's my really strong feeling at the moment for children. I think there's sort of two very strong things for me. That schools need to feel like a safer place for children. I think unfortunately, it's not anybody's fault, but over the last 3 years, we've told our children at one point that schools are not safe because we kept them out of school. So this message has sort of filtered through a little bit, because it wasn't safe to go in because of COVID. And then, but I think prior to that and since that, there's just been a problem with the curriculum for that it's too driven. And so, although we need to get children reading and writing and being able to be mathematical, I completely agree with that, but it's how we do it is really important. So yeah, I think it's something to be looked at for children's mental health, for getting children back into schools. What we're saying about these 25% of children non-attending, I think it's important that we make schools a better place to be. But it needs to come from making them more exciting, making the curriculum more joyful, is my opinion.
Well, I think that's a very valid opinion. I'm sure there's almost 100% of people who would share that opinion. What might be interesting is for you to know that our next speaker, Nikki Edwards, is an ex-Ofsted inspector.
Oh, wow. Oh, fascinating.
And she left Ofsted because she didn't agree with what was happening.
Yeah.
So, and she works in neurodivergency. So, you know, she's a very interesting character. Hence her the title, To Box or Not to Box, which is going to be quite interesting.
Yeah.
You know, whether we actually consider you know, ADHD, ASD, autism, and things like that as a box ticking exercise, or you know, what's it actually doing? I'm very interested to hear myself, because she hasn't discussed it with me, and I'm looking forward to listening to her views on this. Should be good.
Yes, it will be interesting.
Well, has anybody else got anything burning to say? Thank you very much indeed for all your chat comments that are coming up. They're very, very valid, and sort of 2 or 3 conversations going on at once here, once on the screen and once in the chat box, which is great. So unless anybody's got anything else they want to sort of add to this, we'll stop the recording and we'll go off and all have a cup of tea and come back, and hopefully Nikki will be with us, and we'll be able to sit back and listen to, I know what she will have to say will be very, very valuable. Excellent, good. Nobody came in immediately, so therefore the door's closed on that one. I'll stop recording.
Thanks, Ian. This is really useful.